The most unhinged queens in history. History remembers its kings as conquerors, its generals as heroes, and its queens, when it bothers to remember them at all, as wives. These five women were not wives. They were the most dangerous people in the room. They built secret police states, ordered mass executions, crushed rebellions with their own commands, and in several cases outlasted every man who tried to remove them. This is what power looks like when you stop asking for permission. Mary I of England. It's February 4th, 1555, and John Rogers is being burned alive at Smithfield in front of a crowd that includes his wife and 11 children. He is the first. There will be 283 more. Mary Tudor is 38 years old, and she has been Queen of England for less than 2 years. She inherited a country that her father, Henry VIII, had ripped out of the Catholic Church 20 years earlier. She intends to put it back. This is not a theological preference. It is a mission. She was raised Catholic, watched her mother Catherine of Aragon humiliated and discarded, watched herself declared a bastard, watched England's monasteries stripped and sold off, and she has been waiting her entire life for the chance to reverse it. She reverses it with fire. The legal mechanism is the heresy laws, restored in late 1554. Anyone who refuses to recant Protestant belief can be tried, convicted, and burned. Mary's council does the paperwork. Her bishops run the tribunals. She signs off on the executions. In the 3 years between 1555 and her death in 1558, 284 Protestants are burned at the stake in England, more than in any comparable period in English history. She is not burning randomly, she is burning strategically. The first victims are prominent clergy, men like Thomas Cranmer, the Archbishop of Canterbury, who wrote the Book of Common Prayer and personally annulled her parents' marriage. Cranmer recants his faith under pressure, then recants his recantation at the stake, thrusting the hand that signed the recantation into the flames first, to burn it as punishment for its weakness. Mary watches England's reaction, and it is not what she expected. The burnings are not producing mass reconversions. They are producing martyrs. Protestant preachers are writing pamphlets from exile in Geneva, smuggling them back into England, and ordinary people are standing at the executions and going home angrier than when they arrived. She doubles down. She is also, by this point, almost certainly dying. She has 2 phantom pregnancies, swells, and then deflates, and no child appears. Philip II of Spain, her husband, stops visiting England and stops writing. She has tied her entire legacy to restoring Catholicism and producing an heir, and she is failing at both simultaneously. Mary dies in November 1558 of what is probably uterine or ovarian cancer. She is 42. Her half-sister Elizabeth inherits the throne, reverses every religious settlement Mary imposed, and lives another 45 years. The nickname Bloody Mary comes later, coined by Protestant propagandists. She would have found it baffling. She was saving souls. The method was regrettable, but the arithmetic was clear. A few hundred bodies now against millions of souls in eternity. She did the math. History handed her the name. Some queens burn their enemies, some prefer to drown them in politics. 2. Catherine de' Medici. It's August 24th, 1572, and the bells of Saint-Germain-l'Auxerrois are ringing in Paris. That is the signal. Catherine de' Medici is 52 years old, and she has been the most powerful woman in France for over a decade, first as queen consort to Henri II, then as regent to her 3 successive sons, Francis II, Charles IX, and eventually Henri III. France is in the middle of 8 civil wars between Catholics and Protestant Huguenots that will collectively kill somewhere between 2 and 4 million people. Catherine is not a fanatic. She is a manager. She has spent years trying to balance the 2 factions against each other, keeping her sons on the throne by playing every faction off the others. In the summer of 1572, the balance breaks. The immediate trigger is Gaspard de Coligny, the Admiral of France and the most powerful Huguenot leader in the country. He is gaining influence over the young King Charles IX at a rate that terrifies Catherine. She arranges his assassination. The assassin shoots Coligny in the street and misses, taking off 2 fingers instead of the man's head. Coligny survives. He is furious. His faction is furious. Paris is full of armed Huguenots who have come for the wedding of the Protestant Henry of Navarre to Catherine's daughter Margaret, a wedding Catherine herself arranged as a peace gesture 2 days earlier. The situation has approximately 12 hours before it explodes into something uncontrollable. Catherine goes to Charles IX. What she tells him exactly is not recorded. What he agrees to is the decision is made on the night of August 23rd to kill the Huguenot leadership before they can react to the failed assassination. The bells of Saint-Germain-l'Auxerrois ring at dawn on the 24th. Armed Catholic militia and royal guards pour into the streets of Paris. Coligny is killed in his bed and thrown from the window. His body is mutilated in the street below. Then the killing spreads past the list of targets. Then it spreads past Paris. By the time it stops, somewhere between 5,000 and 30,000 Huguenots are dead across France. History calls it the St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre. Catherine did not plan a massacre. She planned a surgical removal of a political threat that got catastrophically out of control. The distinction matters very little to the 30,000 people who did not survive it. She lives for another 17 years, manages 2 more sons on the throne, and keeps France from completely destroying itself through sheer force of political will. She is hated by both sides. She outlasts most of them. When she dies in January 1589, her son Henry III is so preoccupied with his own political crisis that he reportedly says he did not have time to grieve. She spent 40 years holding France together with her bare hands. The country repaid her with a reputation as a poisoner and a witch, none of which has ever been proven and all of which she would have found professionally insulting. Some queens manage crises. Some queens are the reason the crisis never gets started. 3. Empress Theodora. It's January 532 CE, and the emperor of the Byzantine Empire is about to abandon his throne. His name is Justinian I. He has been emperor for 5 years. Outside the palace, Constantinople is on fire. The Nika riots started 4 days ago as a chariot racing dispute and have become a full revolt, with 2 rival imperial factions uniting against Justinian and declaring a new emperor in the Hippodrome. The city is burning. 30,000 people are dead or will be. Justinian's advisors are telling him the ships are ready at the harbor, that the treasury can be moved, that there is still time to leave. His wife stands up. Theodora is approximately 35 years old. She was born to a bearkeeper in the Hippodrome, worked as an actress and possibly a prostitute in her youth, converted to a stricter form of Christianity, and married Justinian in 525 CE after he changed the law to allow an emperor to marry an actress. She has no legal authority, no army, no title beyond empress. She speaks for approximately 2 minutes. The exact words are recorded by the historian Procopius, who was there. She says roughly that she does not intend to flee, that purple makes a fine burial shroud, that a man who has lived as a king cannot live as an exile, that if Justinian wants to leave, the ships are there and the money is there and he is welcome to go. But she is staying. Justinian stays. His general Belisarius is sent into the Hippodrome with the imperial guard. The rioters are packed in, unarmed, expecting a negotiation. The doors are closed behind them. 30,000 people are killed in the Hippodrome that afternoon. The revolt ends the same day it was going to succeed. Justinian rebuilds Constantinople. He codifies Roman law into the Corpus Juris Civilis, the foundation of legal systems still in use across Europe. He reconquers North Africa and Italy. He builds the Hagia Sophia. Historians credit most of it to Justinian. The morning it nearly ended, before any of it existed, was the morning his wife refused to get on a boat. Theodora dies of cancer in 548 CE, 16 years before her husband. Justinian reportedly never fully recovered from it. She saved an empire in 2 minutes. Some women take longer. 4. Wu Zetian. It's 690 CE, and Wu Zetian has just declared herself Emperor of China. Not Empress Consort, not Empress Dowager. Emperor, the title has never been held by a woman in Chinese history. It will never be held by one again. She is 65 years old, and she has been building toward this for the last 40 years, with a patience that is almost geological in its scale. She entered the Tang imperial court at age 13 as a concubine to Emperor Taizong. When Taizong died, she was supposed to retire to a monastery, as secondary consorts were required to do. She did not retire. She had already caught the attention of Taizong's son, the future Emperor Gaozong, and when he took the throne, she was recalled from the monastery and installed as his favorite consort. By 655 CE, she had maneuvered the existing empress and a rival consort out of their positions. The methods allegedly involved accusations of witchcraft, physical mutilation, and death, though the accounts come from sources hostile to Wu and the details are disputed. What is not disputed is the result. She was empress. She was running the court. Gaozong was chronically ill and increasingly reliant on her judgment. She handled military campaigns, foreign policy, and court appointments. When he died in 683 CE, she served as regent for two of her sons in succession, deposed both of them when they showed signs of independence, and in 690 CE simply declared the Tang dynasty suspended, and herself the ruler of a new dynasty, the Zhou. The tool she used most reliably was fear. She created a formal system for receiving anonymous denunciations, a structure that allowed anyone in the empire to accuse anyone else of disloyalty. The accused were arrested, interrogated under torture, and either executed or exiled. She installed a network of secret informants in the provinces. Officials who pleased her were promoted. Officials who questioned her were investigated. She also reduced the power of the old aristocratic families by expanding the imperial examination system, making merit rather than birth the path to government positions. This was genuinely progressive by the standards of 7th century China. The officials she promoted through the exams were loyal to her rather than to ancient family networks that predated the Tang. Reform and terror running simultaneously, each one making the other more effective. She ruled as emperor until 705 CE when she was 79 years old and ill, and a palace coup finally forced her abdication. She died later that year. The Tang dynasty was restored. The officials who had served her carefully avoided discussing her reign in the records they left behind. She governed China for 15 years as its sole ruler. After 40 years of building the position, and the dynasty she built lasted until the people who overthrew her restored the one she had replaced. That is either a failure or an extraordinary act of political longevity, depending on where you start counting. She started counting at 13. She stopped at 79. The math is not complicated. Some rulers use fear. Some rule countries where fear is the only available tool. 5. Ranavalona, Madagascar. It's 1835, and Queen Ranavalona I of Madagascar has just outlawed Christianity on the island. She does not stop there. Ranavalona is approximately 45 years old. She has been queen of the Merina Kingdom since 1828, when her husband Radama I died, and she moved fast enough to secure the throne before any of his male relatives could. The mechanism was not subtle. Several of those relatives were killed in the days after Radama's death. The others understood the situation. Her country, Madagascar, sits in the Indian Ocean, and European powers, primarily Britain and France, have been circling it for decades. Radama had welcomed British missionaries and advisors, allowed Christian conversion, signed treaties, and generally opened the island to foreign influence. Ranavalona found this arrangement unacceptable. Madagascar, in her view, was for Malagasy people, governed by Malagasy tradition, and the foreigners needed to leave. In 1835, she expelled the missionaries, outlawed Christianity, and made practicing the faith a capital offense. Malagasy Christians who refused to recant were executed. Some were thrown off cliffs, some were burned. Some were boiled alive. The estimates of how many died vary widely, but the crackdown was systematic and sustained over years. She also used the Fanampoana, the traditional system of forced labor, on a scale that her predecessors had not. Malagasy subjects were required to provide unpaid labor for the state on royal projects, road building, military campaigns, construction. Workers who died on these projects were not replaced at the state's expense. Their families absorbed the cost. The combination of forced labor, military campaigns, and the disruption of trade created conditions across Madagascar that historians have estimated reduced the island's population significantly during her reign, though exact numbers are impossible to verify. The Tangina ordeal was her preferred tool for rooting out disloyalty. Accused individuals were forced to eat 3 pieces of chicken skin and then drink poison made from the tangina nut. If they vomited all 3 pieces of skin, they were innocent. If they did not, they were guilty, and they were dying anyway. The ordeal was administered freely, to accused traitors, to accused witches, to anyone whose neighbor had filed a complaint. Estimates suggest that by some years, as much as 2% of the population was dying annually from tangina trials alone. She also turned out to be extraordinarily difficult to remove. France attempted a naval bombardment of the port of Toamasina in 1845 as part of a joint operation with Britain to force the island open to trade. Ranavalona's forces repelled them. She then expelled every remaining foreigner from the island and placed a trade embargo on European goods. Madagascar went into isolation. She ruled for 33 years until her death in 1861. Her son Radama II immediately reversed her policies, invited the missionaries back, abolished the Tangina ordeal, and ended the forced labor system. Within 2 years, he was assassinated by nobles who found his reforms too rapid and too disruptive. It turned out her system, brutal as it was, had been holding something together. The something it was holding together was her grip on the throne, but the distinction did not much matter to the nobles who had built their own power under it. She died in her bed at approximately 71, having outlasted every European attempt to remove her, every internal conspiracy, and every foreign navy that pointed guns at her coastline. Madagascar stayed independent until 1896, 35 years after her death. She was monstrous by any reasonable standard. She was also the last person standing. 5 women, 5 countries. One burns Protestants and calls it salvation. One rings a bell and 30,000 people die. One gives a 2-minute speech and saves an empire. One builds a police state and calls it a dynasty. One boils missionaries and holds off the French Navy. History spent centuries pretending these women were footnotes. They were not footnotes. They were the story.